Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Mr. Blount, you're a victim, and we understand that. And yet, we're trying to provide oversight and even provide some new laws potentially to try to deal with this increasing and really dramatic issue of cyber attacks, and specifically today talking about ransomware. Let's just clarify that the record. You made your ransomware payment to the hackers on the day you discovered it. Is that correct?
Ranking Member, thank you for that question. We did not. We made the decision that evening to negotiate with.
So that was the evening of May 7th?
Yes, sir.
And so you didn't make the payment until when?
The payment was made the following day.
May 8th?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you indicated today that the FBI was in discussions with you on May 7th. Is that correct?
Ranking Member Portman, that's correct. Yes, sir.
And what did the FBI tell you? What did they advise you to do with regard to paying the ransom?
Ranking Member Portman, I believe I was not involved in those conversations with the FBI, but in discussions with my team, I don't believe the discussion about the ransom actually took place the first day on May 7th. The focus more was on getting to the proper centers of expertise with the FBI, and in this case, I believe it was the San Francisco office. We started with the Atlanta office in our notification, and then it was a function of they already started to collect data from us, indications of compromise and things.
So their official position is you shouldn't pay ransoms, and yet they didn't communicate that to you as far as you know.
Ranking Member Portman, of course, I was not in that conversation. I can't confirm or deny that, but I do agree that their position is they don't encourage the payment of ransom. It is a company decision to make.
Yeah, and so you knew what their advice was going to be, even if they didn't provide it that day.
Ranking Member Portman, yes, sir, we did.
Okay. Did you talk to the Treasury Department's Office of Foreign Assets Control? This is the office that's charged with sanctions, and so if you're a sanctioned individual and you make a payment, as you know, there are potential violations of law. Did you contact Treasury Department's Office of Foreign Assets Control?
Ranking Member Portman, that day that we decided to negotiate, we hired experts both on the legal side as well as on the negotiation side. We didn't have any direct contact with DarkSide ourselves, and I can assure you that everyone involved in that process continually went and back-checked to make sure that this was not an OFAC-listed entity.
So you were in touch with OFAC to ensure you weren't paying the ransom to a sanctioned entity or to a sanctioned individual?
Ranking Member Portman, I was not involved in those conversations, and so I can't attest to who actually talked to who, but I do know that repeatedly throughout the process, the fact of whether DarkSide was on the sanctions list or not was fact-checked repeatedly.
Okay, we may have some follow-up questions on that just to figure out what the relationship was there. And again, this is about looking forward. How do we avoid the situation where sanctioned individuals or entities are getting a ransom payment, which would be a violation of federal law? The Wall Street Journal says that the decryption tool didn't really work. So you paid the ransom, they give you the decryption tool to be able to undo the harm that they did. That's how it normally works. And yet the decryption tool was not effective. Is that correct?
Ranking Member Portman, the encryption tool is an option that's made available to you. So and when you're looking at bringing critical structure back up as quickly as you possibly can, you want to make every option available to you that you can. Mandy, it can be the best one to answer about how important the encryption tool was, restoring the critical options we needed within the first couple days.
But did the decryption tool work?
It has worked, yes, sir.
So Wall Street Journal story was inaccurate. It was effective.
Ranking Member Portman, I think that article came out pretty early on, so I would say that we know subsequently that the de-encryption tool actually does work to some degree. As I've stated earlier, it's not a perfect tool.
Okay, it was provided to you by the hackers, correct?
Ranking Member Portman, yes, sir, that's correct.
So there's also news reports about how this happened. As I said in my opening statement, there was a compromised password of a virtual private network or a VPN account. This account apparently did not use multi-factor authentication, which again is kind of just a basic cybersecurity hygiene item that, companies should have in place, making it harder for people to gain access. Prior to the attack, did your company require all employees to use multi-factor authentication?
Ranking Member Portman, in the case of this particular legacy VPN, it did only have single-factor authentication. It was a complicated password, so I want to be clear on that. It was not a Colonial 123 type password. The investigation is ongoing by Mandiant to try to determine how that material was compromised. But in our normal operation, we use an RSA token allowance in order to create authentication difficulties for remote access.
So would your advice going forward be that multi-factor authentication ought to be used?
Ranking Member Portman, that's absolutely the correct advice.
So
yes.
TSA has given industry a lot of leeway. Critical infrastructure and voluntary compliance has been the approach. They came out late last month after your attack with some new directives, and now there's a mandate that reporting cyber attacks must happen. They must go to CISA, which is, again, this group within the Department of Homeland Security, and then it will be shared with TSA. You've got a designated cybersecurity coordinator within the company, and you have to review your current activities against their recommendations on cyber risks, identify gaps, and develop remediation measures. Do you support that?
Ranking Member Portman, if you look at our actions starting on May 7th, we almost to the T duplicated what the new standards are, and we are in full compliance today as well.
Yeah. So I mentioned earlier that, we have written legislation in this committee over the years to try to deal with cybersecurity. Pretty much every member here today has been involved with that. And as I said earlier, we obviously need to do more. The question is, with regard to critical infrastructure in particular, should there be more mandates? And now there is, and they have the authority to do this under 2007 law, it appears. Now there is this mandate on reporting it, a mandate on having a coordinator, but still there's not a mandate saying that you have to do certain things in terms of best practices or good cyber hygiene. Do you think there should be additional requirements from TSA with regard to critical infrastructure?
Ranking Member Portman, first I'd like to thank you for your leadership on these issues in the past, but certainly on a go-forward basis. I think anything that can help industry have better security practices, standards to follow would be extremely helpful, especially for the smaller companies that are in other industries as well as my industry, less sophisticated.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.